My name is Jeffrey Brody. I'm the Deputy Director of the Smithsonian's Lemelson Center for the Study of Invention and Innovation at the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C., and that does not fit on a business card. We appreciate you being here at MOHAI to help us celebrate Innoskate 2014. And this is going to be our third and final Idea Lab session of the afternoon, and this is going to be focusing on building Seattle skate parks. As a little bit of context about the Innoskate research program, the Lemelson Center was created in 1995 by prolific American inventor Jerome Lemelson. Our mission is to bring the public together with scholars and inventors to foster a better understanding of the role of invention in American history and to promote and nurture a new generation of innovative thinkers. We do this through an array of scholarship and research programs and the development of museum exhibitions and with special public educational programs such as Innoskate. And the Innoskate research program was created in 2011, and it was designed to pursue this deeper understanding of skate culture's innovative and creative spirit in American life, and to foster this appreciation that we can find invention and innovation in unexpected places. And you've seen this today through all the hands-on activities and through the demonstrations and through the discussions. You see that the skateboarding community is filled with innovative and creative thinkers, and their inventions push boundaries and they solve problems, and in doing so they advance their community. So for our third and final Idea Lab today, we're going to explore one of skateboarding's most fundamental questions and concerns, and this is the question of what's called terrain, or in more general sense, where do skateboarders skate? And to a skateboarder, there may be nothing that's more important to this than this idea of terrain. So much of the skateboarding experience centers on exploring and discovering new ways to use the skateboard to navigate the world around them. But this desire and this quest to skate this new terrain has often led to tensions between skateboarders and the larger public community. So we're really fortunate today to have Micah Shapiro, who's the lead skatepark designer at Grindline Skatepark Design and Construction, and Seattle skateboard activist Matthew Lee Johnston with us today. And these are two leading figures of Seattle's skate community who, through their insights, will provide us their experience and expertise into the question of why terrain is so important to skateboarders and how the efforts of Seattle's skateboarding community have led to the creation of a citywide skatepark system for Seattle. And their ideas and their innovations have given Seattle skaters new terrain to explore and have redefined the traditional ideas about the use of public space in a major American city. So I'd like to thank you both for being here, and the format we've used for these sessions is to give the presenters a few minutes to present their background and tell a little bit about their work. So Micah, we'll turn to you and start us off.
Thank you. I'm Micah Shapiro. I'm the lead designer for Grindline Skateparks. And Grindline, we're a design-build firm based here in West Seattle. We design and build skate parks all over the country and internationally. And in fact, the concrete ledges outside, I want you guys to give a big hand to some of my coworkers here, James, Matt, Brian, who've been busting their butts, building those things and dragging them out there this morning. So I guess to talk about Grindline, who we are, you're going to talk a little bit about the history of skateboarding. Probably most of you guys can relate to this story I'm about to tell. When you skateboard, you're constantly traveling around and you're looking at everything you see in the environment and you're looking at it like, is that skatable? Could I skate that? Could somebody skate that? Is that something, I'm going to come back and I'll remember that and we'll go there and check it out. I started skating in 1986 and the big thing to skate was jump ramps. And curbs, and we would go skate the University of Washington campus. That was really popular. There were no skate parks unless you drove to Canada. We would drive up there to go skate some of the parks up there. But as far as Seattle, you were skating the urban environment, and a lot of it was downtown, basically various alleys and banks and curbs and ledges and constantly getting kicked out of stuff. And then also we were building stuff in our backyards and vacant lots, usually out of wood, jump ramps, mini ramps, vert ramps, different things out of wood. There were a group of guys here in Seattle. They had been down to California and skated a lot of backyard swimming pools because they're really prevalent down there compared to Seattle. and they were like, you know what, we need to start building stuff out of concrete. This is way better. It's more fun to skate. It's going to last a little longer here in the Northwest. Every time you build these wood ramps, they would turn to mush because of the rain. So they started a renegade project here in Seattle, building basically a bowl under a bridge. And they had the bowl all dug out. It was rebarred. They were about to pour some concrete, and the police showed up with their guns drawn and said, get out of there and, get out of the hole, and, we're going to have to fill this in and go to court for this thing. From there, one of the neighbors said, hey, I heard about what happened, but, I've got this backyard. You can build a bowl in my backyard. And so they started building this bowl in West Seattle. And they didn't really know what they were doing. They had never really built a bowl out of concrete. They had guessed at how to do it. And they said, we'll dig this hole. We'll get some guys that actually build swimming pools to come and build this thing, and then we'll skate it. So the swimming pool guys showed up, and they kind of put the concrete in, but they didn't finish it, because when you build a swimming pool, you come back with another layer that seals it. So they're like, oh, no, that's just what we do, so it's done. And so then they had to go in there and try to finish it themselves. And so the bowl still is in West Seattle. It's really, really hard to skate. I'm sure some of you guys have skated it here. But it was kind of the beginning of building stuff out of concrete here in Seattle. From there, they started building another bowl. They started building stuff under bridges in Portland. They started working for general contractors and learning how to work with concrete, and then actually developing their own techniques on how to build stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that, there wasn't really any well, this is how you build a skate park out of concrete. This is how you build a bowl out of concrete. This is how you build this out of concrete. It was, kind of figure it out and invent techniques. So they invented techniques to do this. They realized they had something special about 2002. They decided to start a company called Grindline Skateparks, and from there we've done, a couple hundred skate parks all over the country, and it's constantly, evolving and changing as far as what we do, different techniques. What is going on in skate parks has changed from the first ones that we've done. The cities that we're doing them in have changed. It started out, it was a lot of these really small towns because there was no red tape, and it was easy to do. And then now you're seeing a lot more bigger municipalities like Seattle coming on board and doing things. So it's just been an evolution and an evolving process the whole time. But that's kind of Grindline Skateparks, I guess, in a nutshell. Hopefully I didn't go too long there.
Thanks, Mike. And Matt?
There's a lot more to that story, actually. Yeah. I'm actually just a mediocre skateboarder with an ultra high tolerance for sitting in meetings and dealing with bureaucrats. But at the end of a long 10 years at a corporate job, I took gave myself a little vacation and spent some extra time at the Ballard Bowl in about 2004. And I realized that something really unfair and unjust was about to happen to all my friends and the people that I enjoyed skating that bowl with, which was that the Seattle Parks Department was going to remove it and just walk away, build a park, and not say anything and not do anything, not replace it with anything. So I sit here and I'm representing a group of people, many people that are here today, and a lot of other people who have been involved over the years. Even before I got involved, before 2004, Seattle is a very rich and active scene of people, skateboarders, getting involved in the process, standing up for themselves and making good things happen. You've seen it with Seaskate, the various Seaskate skate parks, and there's a very rich skate culture that doesn't just involve skateboarding, but it also involves activism. So it's not just me, but I ended up getting sucked into this process. The process that I was sucked into ended up producing things like the Citywide Skate Park Plan, which basically is a roadmap for 38 skate parks all over Seattle that are pre-vetted and pre-designated sites, and it's ready to go. So it's basically the city has, if the city gets funding, the city has instructions on how to turn that money into a hole in the ground or a flat surface that can be skated on, which is a huge step forward from a situation where one by one the city parks department is making a autonomous decision about whether or not there should be a skate park put into that community. So I feel like that's kind of the big difference.
Thank you both.
Sure.
So let me in a sense, sort of back up a step and ask you both to explain your perceptions of the question of why are skate parks so important to the skate community? Because on the one hand, skating is individual. You can do it almost anywhere. And yet you've both invested enormous amounts of time and energy in building parks.
I think skate parks, are important to skateboarding because, I can relate. It's like when I grew up, skateboarding was about conflict. It was about conflict with society. You went around, skateboarded places, and you got kicked out. And you were constantly, we'll go to the next place, and we'll get kicked out. And we'll go to the next place and get kicked out. And that was your daily skateboarding, unless you were building something in your backyard. And even then, you'd build a ramp in your backyard. Some neighbor would complain, and next thing you know, you've got this unpermitted structure in your backyard. You got to tear it down. So it was really all about conflict. And then when you're younger, it didn't seem to matter as much, but now at the age that I'm at, I'm 45, I don't want to fight society. I want to work with society. And to go to a skate park and you can see just like kids there all day, whether it's kids, older people, you'll see people from 5 to 65, and they're all skateboarding together, they're all having fun, they're all kind of feeding off each other, and it's this great, interaction of all these different generations. There's kind of a positive mentorship from a lot of the older guys towards the younger guys, because seeing, growing up and maybe making some of the mistakes, they see that these younger guys might be heading down that road, and you see a lot of really cool interaction between all these different generations of skateboarding. And I think it's also brought just different genres of skateboarder closer together. When I grew up, it was, I'm this kind of skater, I'm that kind of skater, I'm a vert skater, I'm a street skater, I only like this and I only like that, I only want to do that. And these days I see kids, they just, I'll do it all. I'm going to do a kick flip over here, I'm going to do a switch flip over there, and then I'm going to do a boneless, and then I'm going to learn inverts, and, they just don't have any well, I'm not going to do that because that's not cool. They're just like, well, I'm going to do that, that's great. Yeah, I want to learn every little bit about skateboarding. And I think just having, a place to go where you can constantly go and you can just skateboard without dealing with the hassles that I dealt with growing up, it's a great thing. And then also even just the terrain, it's like, you can go to a skate park and it's like, compared to what you skate out in the urban environment, it's like perfect. It's like, well, this handrail, there's not a crack in front of it, there's not, rocks to fall on, it's not rough pavement, so you can just sit there and practice and practice and practice, and really, skateboarding, especially when you start skateboarding, it is like repetitive motion. You do the same thing 10,000 times in a row until you have the muscle memory and you just I want to do a kickflip, and you just do it. It's not like, all right, tell the toe to move over here and flip the board this way. It just happens. And so having a place to go where you can just do that all day long and practice, and there's other people doing it too, and so you're just kind of feeding off these other people. You'll go there, you'll skate for an hour, I'm tired, I'll sit down and watch. And then you're watching someone else, that person inspires you to also, yeah, that was really cool, now I want to skate some more. And the next thing you know, you're having another half an hour where you're just skating and skating. So, and from a designer standpoint, it's kind of like we started out okay, we're going to replicate what we have now or what we're currently skating into skate parks, but it's moved to the point where now it's like, okay, let's think about stuff that we don't have or that hasn't been, built or you haven't seen out in the urban environment. So we have this whole other realm of new stuff to build. And we have this generation of skateboarders that have the ability to kind of go out there and ride it. So it's pretty cool to watch.
I grew up in a totally different environment where I didn't face conflict in order to skateboard. I grew up in Hawaii, where we skated mostly in drainage ditches and in elementary schools on the weekends when there was no school happening. So I wasn't typically chased out of any place. I was mostly hiding from authority figures by going into these weird spaces to skateboard by myself with my friends. But as far as the skate park development is concerned, for me in Seattle, and it's very much genesis of the Ballard Bowl experience, it's more of a social justice issue for me, and about who gets to decide how public spaces are used. And for me, I saw that skateboarders and the types of people who sort of gravitate towards skateboarding were being underrepresented in the conversations that were going on behind closed doors and in public meetings when it came to, oh, here's a park, what should go into that park? Oh, here's an open public space, how should it be used? I heard lots of disparaging things being said about the types of people who typically ride skateboards and about skateboarding in general, and I felt like that was very unfair and wrong. And so for me, it's more about, I mean, all those things that Micah said are absolutely true, and I think that everybody needs to have a safe and accessible place to skate in their neighborhood because there are enough skateboarders to justify that statement. So if you've got a constituency that's large enough, then somebody needs to be standing up for that constituency and say, these people need a place to go. And whether or not they want that place to go is a totally different conversation, and we should probably address that a little bit. But I think that just like, you know, probably tennis players did 1,000 years ago, whenever tennis was started, you know, they got together and they said, we deserve a place. And, you know, it should come from public money and public funding, and we should build these things. And so for me, it's just about making it fair and making it right and giving skateboarders the places that they deserve.
Very interesting, and two very important concepts related to the importance of place. And Micah, one of the things you touched on was this notion of the community and having the people feed off one another and exchange some ideas. And that is a very prevalent theme in the study of innovation, because, and you can see it in the exhibits here, they talk about in Seattle, and how I think it's Nathan Mervold who's on video in there talking about the greatest resource in Seattle are its people. And the whole idea of you bringing a creative set of people together with new ideas, and they will push each other and create something new. But to that end, we're definitely going to move into the public policy discussion of this. But Micah, from your experiences, you know, what makes a great skate park, and what are the innovations? You know, we look back to the 70s when skate parks were poorly designed, and, you know, to you, and what makes a great skate park, and what are some of the innovations you've seen in skate park design that you're now seeing in this citywide plan in Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what makes a great skate park, because it isn't just like, well, you got to have A, B, and C. You know, it's like when you go to a park, you can tell if there's people there all the time and they're having fun. Well, then that's probably a good skate park, because it's really that's what it is. You know, it's a combination of things. It's like, well, what are the elements? How do they line up? Is there places where people can just stand around and enjoy it? I mean, you can build this amazing skate park that's like, oh, this is the funnest thing to skate, but it's out in the middle of the sun, and there's no shade, there's no water, there's no place for people to sit and watch. And so all you can do there, you can go there and skate, and then when you're done skating, it's like, well, I don't want to hang out here anymore because, you know, I'm burning up in the sun. I'm like out on this concrete. It's like a giant, you know, griddle. I'm cooking. We got to go. So having that part of it, where it's more than just the skatable elements, it's the placement of the skate park and its environment. We've come a long way from when skate parks used to be like, well, here's a old tennis court. We're going to put a fence around it because we don't want, like, you know, skateboards flying out, or we don't want people going in. And so then as a skateboarder, you go into this little fenced-in area, and it feels like you're in like a prison yard, and it's not very conducive. I think skaters, because you interact so much with your environment, you're very influenced by your environment. So having something where you go there and you're just like, oh, this is, you know, I could just sit here and hang out all day. And whether you're even skateboarding or you're just sitting there watching skateboarding, you know, you can be there and just having a good time.
So, and in that process, you know, we've talked a bit more about what's the role of the skater in the design of a skate park, and how important is that? In the study of invention, we talk about user inventors. These are people who are creating new inventions because they have the desire to use this new tool in the way that they need to use it. And typically, what we've seen in the design of skateboards themselves is you have the skaters who are implementing new inventions to enable them to do the tricks they want to do on the skateboard. How does that reflect in skate park design? How important is that?
I think it's really important. I mean, I look at the kind of the group of guys that I work with and that started Grindline, and what they did is they said, there's something missing from my skateboarding experience. I don't know how to build it or do it yet, but I'm going to go figure it out. And then it's not like, well, I'll go to school and learn it, or I'll go talk to these guys that have been, you know, building skate parks. There wasn't really anybody building the type of skate parks that what the terrain that these guys wanted, you know, because at the current time, it was like you wanted a skate park, you call a general contractor, you probably got a landscape architect that's designing it, and he's kind of like, well, I'll just take my little French curve and do this fancy little thing, and then we'll get this general contractor to build it, and it looks pretty on a piece of paper, and maybe when it's done even, it looks pretty good, and then the skaters go skate it, and this is terrible. You know, nothing lines up, there's a wall here. So, and it wasn't just these guys at Grindline, there was other guys that were involved in this whole journey. but deciding that, like, you know what, we need to go build stuff that what we want to skate, and it's stuff that doesn't exist yet, and nobody really knows how to build it. There's techniques that are out there that are kind of like what we're going to do, but we need it, and we'll take those and we'll incorporate them into our process. But at the same time, how to, basically, no one was doing like, okay, we're going to build this crazy, if you see like a skate park bowl, it looks like this giant amoeba and all these flowing curves, and there's no way to really design that on a piece of paper. I mean, you can kind of draw it, but you can't do like, well, this is this radius and this radius here because it might change, and this is, an infinite blend of radiuses. And really, it's the eye of the finisher that's making that perfect. Like, not to just kind of wander off all these tangents, but like when I design a skate park and there's like, okay, it's going to blend from this 6-foot section to this 8-foot section, I don't design that section because I don't know how that blends. It's our finishers that go out there and they look at it and go like, oh yeah, it needs to do this, and it needs to do this, and it needs to do this, because it's like almost like an art form.
I was just about to say it's largely science and engineering until it becomes art and creativity.
Yeah, and I look at a lot of what I do is based off what I know from what I've seen our construction guys do, what they can do, what they can't do, what they will do, what they won't do. They're telling me, like, don't design it like this anymore. Do it like this, because that's not going to work. So incorporating that into the design, and so it's been this, when I started at Grindline, I started in 2005. I had, 15, 20 years of skateboarding experience. The same amount of time of building stuff for skateboarding, but building out of wood. I had never worked with concrete. Pretty much how I got my job was this one guy was like, hey, yeah, you built those ramps over there for that contest. I'm like, oh yeah, I did that, and I'm good with computers. So yeah, sure, I'll design skate parks. That sounds really fun. And that was literally the extent of my, job interview. And then it's like you go in there and it's like, not only is the whole public process that, Matt has talked about, which I had to learn, but then also just like how to design a skate park that works. And so it's been this really fun learning experience, and just the ideas that bounce back and forth off everybody in our company, and not even just in our company, but you'll see other companies, they did something really cool. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Let's figure out how to incorporate that into our design. Or you just even seeing stuff out in the natural environment and going like, let's figure out how to incorporate that into skate parks.
So let me move this forward a little bit. So we've gone through a stage of recognizing that places for skaters to congregate and skate is important as one component of where they skate. You've talked about the evolution of a professional core that designs and builds skate parks with input from skaters, designed for skaters. And then we get to the next part of Seattle's skate park story, which is this whole idea of earning and garnering community recognition that skate parks should be implemented throughout the city. And Matt, I'd like you to jump in here and tell us about your experience in this idea of, because what I see as being the innovative skate park plan for Seattle, and you're going to share some of the history with this, and it may not be the first place that had the idea, but to see it being played out in Seattle is a model for other communities.
I hope so. I hope it is. And people have called and said, hey, how'd you do that? And can we get, can you do it for us? And usually the answer is no. But, I think it was a perfect storm of events that happened in Seattle where it was like, and it was funny because one thing led to the next thing, led to the next thing. So, like, they were going to take Ballard away, and so they offered us Green Lake instead. And so we ended up saying, like, okay, let's keep that plate spinning. Green Lake. Yeah, sure, maybe we'll take that instead. And then we kept fighting the Ballard fight, and so then we got Ballard and Green Lake. And then while Ballard and Green Lake were underway, we're like, hey, this isn't enough, and there's all these other problems, and all these social issues started rising up out of the conversation around Ballard and Green Lake. And that turned into a conversation about, well, let's solve all of these problems globally instead of having to have these contentious conversations in every community at every point of the process. And so really what the citywide skate park plan was, and Suzanne Friedman and the Parks Department and several other people at the Parks Department deserve a lot of credit for getting this underway and getting it done, as do all the people that sat on the citywide skate park plan committee. There was as a multidisciplinary group of people, like eight people, somebody from the ports, somebody from the parks department, just a couple skaters. But really what it was about a holistic approach to answering and solving all of the questions in every community all at once. So there were 2 rounds of these meetings in all the different quadrants of the city. And in every skate park meeting, and some of you have been in these meetings, there's always like a group of people with their torches, like John Lithgow in Footloose. To you kids, that's a movie from the 80s about dancing. Dancing was illegal. Okay, go home. Your parents will show you that later. But so, yeah. So it was like these really, really awful meetings, and you know, one of the best things to do in these meetings is to bring the actual stakeholders into the meeting, which are the kids that are going to be skating this park for the next, 12 to 18 years. And so you bring these kids into these meetings, and there are these adults, these leaders in their communities, standing up and saying very, very disparaging negative things about them. So for me, as somebody who was like trying to orchestrate a movement and trying to get people to change their ideas about skateboarders and bringing these kids into this environment, I felt very guilty because I felt like I had exposed these kids to this sort of awful thing that was like kind of underlying in their community. Maybe they didn't even know about it. And so one thing that I wanted to achieve was I wanted to get that all out of the way and expose as few people to the process as possible. So we had these big meetings. We brought everybody in and we said, like, where do you want your skate parks? And we made these big lists of like everybody just kind of pre-associated and wrote down every possible place they could think of a skate park. And then we said, why you hate skate parks? Write it down. And all these people came in and just wrote all these things, skaters are this, skaters are that. And then why do you like skate parks? And we just got it all done at once. And then we wrote it all down. It was very objective. The process wasn't favoring skateboarders. It wasn't favoring neighbors. It was like, is there a bus line nearby? Is it easy to get to? Is there water? What's the water table at that park? Is it a good location? Is there available property there for a skate park? And so all these questions got answered very systematically, very objectively, all at one time, ratified by the city council, didn't get stamped by the mayor. Still mad at Greg Nichols for that. But it's there and it's official. And so now all that needs to happen for a skate park to get built is money just needs to appear. And so, we're not having levies anymore, which is it's sort of a mixed bag, right? A lot of people are waiting to see how that plays out. But the last levy process, the way it worked was the levy committee sat down and they're like, okay, we need to generate a list of projects that we're going to fund with this millions of dollars that we're going to take from taxpayers. What is it going to be? We said, here's a citywide skate park plan, and here's our top 10 priority parks. And so they just said, okay, cool. We're just going to fund the top 10 projects. And it was that simple. It was a half an hour conversation. 10 skate parks got added to the levy. The levy was put on the ballot. The voters voted it in. The money was generated through taxes, and those parks are built. And now Hubbard Homestead is being built, and we went from having a parks department addressing a skate park issue one at a time in Ballard to a levy that funded essentially 10 skate parks in less than 10 years in Seattle. So I think as a long answer to your question, the best thing that possibly could have happened out of that citywide skate park plan was that we don't have to go into meetings anymore and argue and justify with people that actually should not be able to tell us that we can't have a skate park. We don't have to have those conversations anymore. It's over. It's done. Skateboarders deserve skate parks. They need to be in the ground, and they're going to get built. We just need to find the money.
Yeah. I think it's that last point that's the... In case, it wasn't... want everybody to hear is it's that last part of it that strikes me as being the innovation, which is that to the Seattle community, to the taxpayers, to the civic leaders, you challenge traditional ideas about what the use of public space in public parks should be used for and resources used and committed to those aspects. Everyone takes for granted that there's a ball field and there's a basketball court and probably tennis courts. But the idea that's the shift here that I see is that the communities acknowledge that skate parks are important and should be integrated into the use of the land in these public areas. So I think that was an important innovation. And to dramatize that or to illustrate it, bring it out, how many other cities have a plan like this?
I think there's I know Portland has one, Arlington, Texas has one. I don't know if there's any other cities that have done this. Bryan, Texas is they've got 3 that they're doing, but most other large municipalities are still on this we're going to do one skate park here, and then we'll see what happens next. If someone, if we get some more money, or if we get bothered by some citizens, then maybe we'll think about it.
And are either of you aware of how many of the parks in the Portland plan have been built under the aegis of that plan?
I think 4 now.
So
in
in
Seattle,
Seattle,
they've got a similar thing where it's like 30, or it's something like that. They've got quite a few.
and in Seattle, you've so far accomplished 10 or 11, or 11th is being built. So I think. And within that, so what another interesting aspect to me within the plan is that it's not cookie cutter. It's not one size skate park for all locations in all areas. You guys, can you talk about and share that? What's the details of that plan and the difference in sizes in regional parks and skate spots and how those ideas came about?
I think that the best thing about having a plan, it's like if you're just getting the one skate park, like when I first started this job, it was like, okay, this city's building this skate park, and this might be the last skate park they put there. So it's like, it better have everything, for everybody, because that's it. There might not be another one. Whereas now, a perfect example is like, okay, Jefferson Skate Park got built here, and it was the first place in Seattle where the site allowed you to do a really deep bowl. So it's like, okay, perfect, we're going to do 11-foot deep bowl because it's the first place we've been able to. The next park is Judkins. It's like, well, you've got this giant deep bowl up the street, so let's make Judkins completely different. And we can, it's a smaller park, so let's put smaller stuff in. Let's make nothing bigger than 6 feet deep and make it like a fun park. And so you can go there and just have fun. And then if you want to go skate something really big and, deep, you can go up to Jefferson because it's only a mile and a half away. And I feel like the Seattle Skate Park plan is only going to build on that because you have so many of these parks already where it's like, well, if you want to go skate this, you can go here. It's there. Or, when we come to the next one, it's like, okay, well, what's missing in the plan? And then what does this site allow us? Because it's like, if it's a big site, you can do this. If it's a flat site, maybe you can do this. If it's a hilly site, well, then maybe it's better to do that. And so every time you come to a different site, you're looking at it like, what's going to work here? Because you don't want to try to stick the square peg in the round hole. You're kind of to see what's going to work with it.
And if you're watching at home, right, you see how the conversation has totally changed, right? So it's like the Jedi mind trick, kids, Star Wars, anybody? So, it went from the thing we were talking about, this contentious thing we're talking about now, to now Micah's talking about, like, looking at a holistic approach to designing a network of skate parks that all have complementary features. And this is something that I think this is where the true innovation is. It's about changing the conversation and figuring out a way to change the conversation in a way to have it continue momentum in that direction. So skateboarders of Seattle and everybody who was involved deserves 100% credit for this. Got involved. We've got everybody on board. We've got the old people, all the people that were in the old folks' homes that were around the Ballard Bowl all came to the meetings. They contributed. Everybody was saying the same thing so many times to the bureaucracy, which is not inherently evil by itself. It's not like, they all want to be jerks and not build skate parks. It's just like they get into this groove and that's just what they do, and they're not used to change. And so you have to kind of get them to see things differently. And once you get them to see things differently and you kind of push, the conversation changes. And now we're having a totally different conversation, which is, how do we build a network of skate parks? And I think as far as innovation is concerned, when people say innovation, they think of like an iPhone, or they think of like a cool new gadget or something like that. But I think as far as like the social change that like Slag is creating in Seattle, is another great example of like how we can innovate socially to make things better for us. I'd much rather have a complementary network of skate parks and just a forward-thinking group of people that are looking at civic planning in a way that benefits everybody than I would to have a new iPhone. I think that, the things that we do together as a group of people are almost way more powerful and meaningful than what, like, one inventor does on a piece of technology or something.
We're coming toward the close of this session, and before we move on, I want to ask if any of you out in the audience have a question about something about the skate park design, or the process, or the question of where skaters skate that you'd like to ask that we haven't touched on yet? Yes. I'm going to send you a microphone. Oh, yes, we are.
I'm just wondering if you guys are ever going to, I know Grindline does stuff all over the place, but like we live in the north end and our son skates and he's small. And so if we had kind of more access to what was going on, especially with Grindline, because some of the parks out there are pretty, and so we have to constantly be bringing him into Seattle, which is fine. But are there any plans to kind of globally get activism going for some of the other outlying areas of Greater Seattle?
You know, a lot of it, it's driven by the people in the community. You know, I'd say probably out of the, I don't know, 25 to 30 projects I work on in a year, there's you know, 95% of them have somebody like a Matt Johnston or a group of Matt Johnstons that are involved and have basically gone to the, you know, to the city council or their town council and like, hey, we need to do this. You know, my kids need a place to do this, or I'm an older skater and I realize that, you know, people need a place to do this. And so a lot of it is really driven by the community. Do you live in the city limits of Seattle or like north, like Shoreline or Mill Creek? And I know you have one skate park there, and I bet my guess is the city's like, well, we built our skate park, and now we're on to the next fire to put out. And it really is, it's driven by the community, and I'm not one here to tell you, like, oh, you got to go bother them and drive them, you know, to do it. But it's usually how it works, is getting a group of people together. You show up at every city council meeting, and you basically, you literally sit there and like, hey, there's this need. Hey, there's this need. Look at all these people I brought here. I've brought in, you know, 30 kids here, and they don't have a place to skate. You know, there's one skate park. It's always crowded. They need more places to skate. And too many scooters there. Yeah, I mean, it could be too many scooters, too many bikers, too many whatever. But, yeah, that's how it always usually works, is it, you know, that someone has to, because you just see these city people, they're so busy, you know, because they're getting bombarded by a million different things, like, oh, we got to fix the street, and, you know, we've got this problem with the school over here, and then there's this, and then there's that, and we don't have enough money to do it. And, you know, it's kind of like the squeaky wheel is the wheel that gets greased, and that's, you know, that's from what I've seen. And maybe, I don't know, Matt, if you have anything to elaborate on that. Okay.
Okay, what's the life expectancy of a park, and is there a technique to resurface?
I mean, right now there's parks that are 30 years old that people are still skating. You know, it really depends on the climate. The parks here, you can see they weather here because of the rain. If you're somewhere in the Midwest where you get freeze-thaw, they're gonna wear in faster. And so there's kind of one of our next markets we're going to be moving into is skate park renovation. And resurfacing them. So, but the reason we chose concrete, and not just as Grindline, but as this group of guys that started Grindline, was because at the time, it was the highest performing material to skate on. It was also the longest lasting durability-wise. You could say the lifespan, you know, the present moment, it's probably 20 years, 30 years, depending on where you are. Some places it's wearing faster, some places it's wearing slower, depending on the climate. But there's nothing else that's better at the time. At the present moment, there's nothing else that's better to build it out of. And not only because of the reasons I talked about, the durability and the performance factor, but also the ability to mold it and sculpt it into any shape that you can think of.
I have two quick questions. First of all, Matt, you talked about having a system in place that we really only need money to build skate parks at this point. Can you give me a sense of a ballpark of what kind of dollar figures go into a skateboard park? And secondly, what sorts of parts of the city can you talk to in order to get matching funds, in order to talk to Parks Department doesn't have any money. And how is the new, what is it called, the parks that we just voted on?
The levy.
The levy. How does that come into play in that process? So it's kind of three questions.
I guess I could give you, you know, basically like a park like Jefferson Park. The total cost of that, if you count the design, the construction, all the salaries of the city employees that kind of facilitated that thing, that's about $1 million project.
Contrast that with the Crown Hill Skate Dot.
Crown Hill Skate Dot, the construction cost of that was $75,000, and then there was probably some additional money in the design portion of that. And those sound like large figures, but anytime you're working in a large metropolitan area, money just kind of disappears. You build that same Jefferson Park, you go build that in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and it's probably, you know, $400,000. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast when you're dealing with large municipality in something that's an expensive city.
I don't have to be as political as Micah is. Seattle has a unique reputation for being a very expensive city to build anything in. And if you look at Seattle's process and the process that we're all familiar with that's led to like the giant transformer that's stuck underneath the waterfront, who knows if that'll ever come out of there, or like any other city project that takes forever. So to your second question, I have a very mixed feelings about moving away from the levy system, which was working and which generated enough funding for 10 great skate parks, to a parks district which is going to be sort of an autonomous body that's going to make these decisions on its own. However, the autonomous body of the city council, which is linked to the Parks District, was very, very helpful in us getting Seskate through the grist mill that it took to just get that all done. And the city council was very helpful. So I think the same process of lobbying people, having those conversations, changing those conversations, we still need to keep doing that. We need to now apply that process to the Parks District. Who knows if it's going to work as well as the levy process has. When people were voting on the levies, they weren't necessarily voting on skate parks. They weren't necessarily voting on parks maintenance. They were just voting on levies, right? So I don't know what's going to happen, but I do think that the next thing that needs to happen is the next wave of skate park activists need to step up and start having that conversation with the Parks District about how we're going to fund the next 10 years of skate park development, because we're at the end now of the money that we had sort of earned for ourselves in the last decade. So people need to just sort of, and I'm happy to answer any questions or help people get started. I'm not going to promise you that it's going to be easy or fun. In fact, I will promise you it won't be either of those things. But it's very fulfilling to see these things get built once you work on them, as everybody has been able to do.
So let me ask you both before I ask you a final concluding question. If there's some other aspect of skate park design or skate park community plan that we haven't touched on that you guys want to make sure that we identify.
Well, the thing that I like to bug Micah about all the time is, so we've had this conversation in the past when we go into a skate park meeting, and Micah says to everybody there, he says, okay, here's some paper and some pencils, like draw the features that you want to see in the skate parks, and they all draw the stuff, and then he puts it up on the board, and it's like that stairs from the park down the street, and then there's that bowl that I saw in Thrasher that one time, and there's just like all these things that we've all seen a million times before, and maybe there's like that one cool kid that like drew the weird like dragon-shaped feature that he can skate through the mouth and shoot out like fire or something like that, but that's super rare. And so I'm always like, trying to like push the conversation to like, how do we evolve these feature designs to put something new into the park? And I'll give Micah's answer before, so he doesn't have to, which is like, he says, well, first of all, the city's not paying me to build these crazy things and all that stuff. And he said, the most popular feature in the skate park is usually like the stairs or the ledge or whatever. And we've built crazy things like that before. And sometimes it's successful, but it's kind of risky. And you can't take big risks with civic dollars. You can't like take this big project, all these people get behind it, there's all this tax money put into this project, and they're not necessarily giving Grindline that money to just to experiment, right? So I'm going to hand the mic to Micah, because what I want to know is, how do we get to that point? How do we figure out, there's like the Newberg volcano. I remember when I first saw that, I was like, wow, it rotates. That's totally cool and new and interesting and true. Not everybody was skating that, but it was sort of the signature feature of the park. So there's been cradles. There's like these ribbon things. Maybe what's next? What are you guys imagining in the lab right now? What's kind of like cooking in the secret underground layer of Grindline that you guys are going to reveal in the next crazy design?
You can't give that away right now. I'm sorry. No, I think one of the things as a designer that's always a challenge is, you go to these meetings and you get 10 skaters in a room and there's going to be 10 different opinions on what needs to go into a skate park or what's good. Or you can have a discussion about what's the proper radius of a transition in this size of a quarter pipe. And, some people like it tight. Some people want it mellow. So it's hard to like, well, it has to be this and it has to be this and it has to be this. It really is, you're kind of trying to take everybody's ideas and smash them all together into something that that's going to work for the majority of the people. And then maybe there'll be the one thing where it's like, we'll put in one crazy thing that maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work. We'll see. When we built the first cradle, there wasn't anybody that really well. Are you going to be able to loop it or not loop it? Nobody knew. It was just kind of build it and see what happened. But a lot of that experimentation happens in small towns where you get to just do, where they're like, yeah, you guys are the expert, go build whatever. And then you come to a place like Seattle, and you put that skate park here, and it would be a disaster because you're going to get 1 million people. I would say Seattle, there's a lot of very highly educated people and a lot of very opinionated people. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're smart people, but they'll show up at the meeting and they will tell you what you need to do. And you have to put this in the skate park, or you need this, or there's no way we can have that, or that's terrible. And what they're really saying is, this is what I want to skate. This is what I like skateboarding. And so you have to kind of pull that, you're kind of translating that out of them and like, okay, how do we take these ideas and make them into something that actually works? I mean, I hear so many crazy ideas of like, oh, well, you got to put this in the park, and I'm thinking to myself like, no, that's just, I can't do that because it's like it would ruin our reputation. I mean, some guy that's like, well, you'll get a guy that like, okay, this guy can ollie really high. He's got a 4-foot high ollie or whatever. He's like, can I have like a 28-foot tall flat bar? I want a 28-foot tall flat bar that's like 20 feet long and I'm like, well, I can understand you can skate that, but, the majority of other people can't skate it. And he's like, well, I know 1 million people that can skate it. That'll be his answer. And so you're kind of like, well, I like that idea, but we got to temper it down so other people can skate it. So it's kind of a mix of things where it's like, yes, we experiment, and I'm sure you guys have been to Grindline parks where there's something like, wow, that was a crazy idea, or what did they do there, or who thought of that? That was really interesting. But at the same time, you're trying to temper it so there's something there for everybody to skate.
You just beautifully answered the question about, one of the themes we've been talking about today are what are the factors that promote innovation in skateboarding and what are the factors that inhibit innovation in skateboarding. So to be innovative, for something to be innovative, it needs to have that impact broadly within the public, within the market. And so some of the things that Micah was just talking about is why even great ideas or great inventions don't become great innovations. And I just want to maybe ask you quickly on this note, because we're going to wrap up and get ready for the best trick contest. For all of the difficulties, and Matt, you've talked about how it's not fun and it's a lot of work, Seattle still seems to be way far ahead in terms of the citywide skate park plan. So why Seattle? Why has it happened here when it's not happening or hasn't happened to this degree in other places? And that'll be the last thought on that.
I just want to say something really quick, because I can remember when I started working at Grindline, I traveled all over the country to design skate parks, and like all these cool skate parks are going in everywhere else except my city. Like I come home and be like, oh, well, I can drive out to Bainbridge or I can go to Workus Island or somewhere, but there's nothing really in Seattle. So, I don't think people realize how hard Matt and other people have worked to make, all this fun you get to go have and all this fun that I get to go design happen. And it's been a lot of hard work and really, a lot of pain in the ass.
It's true. Thank you for that. I don't know. It's like I'm sitting up here with Micah and the Ivers clam and the rain beer and like Jeff Bezos in his evening wear or whatever that is over there. And it's just, I think Seattle is a special place. And I think that we have the Parks Department to thank for it a little bit because of their ridiculous idea to tear the Ballard Bowl out. That motivated a lot of people, and that was a flashpoint for a lot of people. It exposed kind of the underbelly of the system that wasn't working very well, and it gave us a really like rare opportunity to see it all at once and just kind of like tear the skin off and see all of the problems all at one time. So I don't think that this citywide skate park plan, it may or may not have materialized without that Ballard experience. But I think a lot of it goes back to that. And a lot of it, goes back to the pioneering spirit of the Northwest. I think that is deeply ingrained in the Grindline story. When you watch Northwest or you hear Micah talk about the bowl under the Schmitz Park Bridge, and you talk about just these people who just wanted to build something that wasn't available to them and create something that didn't exist. That kind of pioneering spirit, I think, is alive and well in Seattle. You see it in industry here. You see it in Boeing. You see it in Microsoft. So I think I don't know if it's in the water. I don't know if it's just the fact that people have a lot of time to think in the wintertime when it's raining. But I do think that this area does actually have that in its blood and in its DNA, and that's not unique to skateboarding. It's actually, or skate parks. It's part of our culture.
It's an excellent answer. So Micah and Matt, thank you for sharing all of that insight with us. And that's going to quickly conclude the Idea Labs for today. It's been a great day of sharing ideas about innovation and its connection to skateboarding in lots of different ways. And we're going to go outside because the Best Trick competition is going to be our concluding event for Innoskate 2014. But before we run out there, I just really want to, again, thank the staff here at MOHAI. They have, in the parlance of skateboarders, have killed it today with all of the organization and the work that went into creating this kind of event and creating such a welcoming environment for all of us to be at and to share these ideas and experiences. So thank you, MOHAI, for all of that. And thank you for being here with us. And let's go outside and have a great time at the Best Trick.